second term of another 2-year term if I am reelected. And this group did help me get elected the first time. In fact, without this group going out and door knocking for me, the results may have been very different, as I only won by just a couple hundred votes the first time. I came into it as a no-name into the political realm, both locally and at the state level. I started to really get politically involved during COVID. And to make a long story very short, you don't mess with my kids. So when you start messing with my kids and you start messing with my business, then it becomes personal, and it was a huge wake-up call for me. I had been a homeschooling mom, small business owner for years. I always voted in the generals, rarely voted in the primaries, was not involved with my local party, and just did my, check the box, go vote, and move on with life. But during that time, I really started to educate myself about both the local and state laws as I saw them routinely being violated. And I joined an organization called Ohio Stands Up, became one of their sit on their board of directors. And during that time, over a 2-year span, we took calls from students, teachers, parents, employers, employees about all of the overreach from our governor. And so we tried to help them the best that we could by providing exemptions for masks and vaccines, and trying to get them connected with organizations who could help them. So during that time is when I found out about what the County Central Committee was. And I found out that my precinct was vacant in Bethel West. And so I had some friends that had served on the County Central Committee for like 7 years. So they told me how I could write a letter to the chairman, ask to be appointed. So I did. I was appointed. And then I was excited. I was excited to really start getting involved at the local level in politics and making a difference. And so I went to them and I said, where do I get started? And they said, well, we don't really meet. We haven't done anything for 7 years. Like, we've been on it 7 years, and we have like one meeting a year. And I was absolutely floored. I had no idea that the local involvement was so very little. And so I started to recruit other like-minded conservatives for our County Central Committee, and they got appointed. And then, there was probably about 15 to 20 of us that came on, and we started asking questions, and we wanted to know why we weren't meeting, and why we didn't have a website, and why we weren't doing more. And so slowly, we have been able to start meeting now, going from once a year to 3 or 4 times a year, organizing a pretty good Lincoln Day dinner, where we actually, the first year that I joined, we actually had to cancel the Lincoln Day dinner because there was no interest. So now it looks like this Lincoln Day dinner, we're going to fill every seat. And people are starting to get to know their elected officials, starting to vet them, starting to ask the hard questions. They want answers. They don't want lip service. They want to see action. They want to see conservative policies. They want to see people do what they say they were going to do when they stood up in front of the voters and asked for their vote. So got on the County Central Committee, then I learned about State Central Committee, found out that I had a male and a female rep for my Senate district. For those that aren't familiar with the State Central Committee, it's the board of directors for the Ohio Republican Party. There are 66 members, a male and a female rep from each of the Senate districts. And the State Central Committee, I'm finding out, is one of the best kept secrets in Ohio politics. This is how they control the narrative and the direction of the party. And if it's one thing I want everyone to walk away with today, I need you to understand how important the State Central Committee is. Because we've had a lot of discouraged folks out there, especially following issue 1 and 2. And I watched a lot of my conservative friends kind of wave a white flag. I watched leaders of organizations say we're no longer going to support State Central Committee members because you guys aren't doing anything, you're ineffective. And to that, I have a list of things that we've been able to accomplish over the last 2 years. And I would argue that before we came on, this never happened. You never saw a resolution introduced. You never saw anyone challenging or pushing back on, hey, that candidate is not doing what they said they were going to do. They're not following the platform. That candidate needs to be censured. That candidate needs to be held accountable. And yes, we need to pass resolutions that say we are a pro-life party. We are unapologetically pro-life. We are going to work to defend the unborn. We are going to fight for your Second Amendment rights. We're going to lay out a platform so there is no confusion about what the Republican Party stands for. Well, we are outnumbered on the State Central Committee right now, because when you don't take Rome in a day, okay? You don't just come in as an outnumbered group and start taking control of an organization that has been under the thumb of the establishment elite for decades. You don't do that, but you do start speaking out. You start making noise. You start challenging the way that this broken system has been operating for decades, and you start getting attention, and then you start getting others who say, yeah, this isn't right. So the way that the State Central Committee operates right now is many of the members are appointed by statewide officials such as DeWine or Husted or LaRose, because they need their people in there. They need their people in there because we vote on endorsements. Are we going to endorse in the primary or not? We decide whether that we're going to do that. And then we decide who gets the resources if we do vote to endorse. So someone like myself, I ran on, I'm not endorsing in the primaries. The people need to decide. I came on the tail end of people on the State Central Committee picking DeWine, even though nobody wanted DeWine.
Exactly. The Democrats did.
So they did that in spite of what their voters were telling them. They voted to endorse DeWine, therefore he got the party endorsement, therefore he got the party resources. So I ran on, I'm not doing that. And I have kept my word in that area, and I've also kept my word in being a bold conservative on the committee that's saying we need to get back to writing down what is the Republican Party about, goals, vision for the people. Because without a vision, the people perish. Nobody's interested in what we're doing if we can't pass conservative policies. What does having an R behind your name mean if you can't even protect women and children? Okay, so speaking of, I'll get to that in a minute. So right now we probably have about 20 to 24 conservatives on the committee out of 66. We have quite a few moderates, and then we have quite a few people who are just there to make sure their person's will is done. What I mean their person, I mean their statewide candidate. That could be DeWine, that could be Husted, that could be LaRose.
Rhinos.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not there to represent the people of their district. They're there to do what they are told.
Mm-hmm.
So I caused a lot of trouble with my conservative colleagues over the last 2 years. We ended up with very large targets on our back, which was totally expected because we went in there to serve the people, to do what we were elected to do. So we knew what we were going to be, the cost of that. So each of us that was so vocal over the last 2 years now has a hand-picked candidate that will be very well funded in the upcoming March 19th primary election. So my opponent has been handpicked by the Husted team because the Husted team called me. Now keep in mind, Husted isn't running for governor until 2026. We were getting phone calls nearly every 2 or 3 weeks from his people, and I did get one from him, basically asking for endorsements in 2026. And I said, first of all, we were right in the middle of issue 1 and 2, and I said, I'm not really sure why you're calling me about this right now. Like, this is where my focus is, and I think it's where your focus needs to be as well. But I don't endorse in the primaries. I let my voters decide that. And so that was kind of, that was the final, I'm sure that was the final thing that I said. It was like, okay, we got to run somebody against her. So all of my conservative colleagues on the committee that got in the last 2 years, we all have well-funded, establishment-picked challengers. Some from the Husted team, some I've heard from the LaRose team who would also be looking for an endorsement down the road. So at this point, we are continuing to, we had our last meeting, so we won't have any more meetings for, our election is in March, our last meeting was in January, just a week ago. And so now, once we get through the elections, we'll see who is left, and then we'll regroup and make a plan for the next 2 years. So I wanted to share with you some of the things that we have been able to accomplish over the last 2 years.
This is at the county level, right?
This is the state level.
Oh, this is at the state level?
This is at the state
Okay,
level,
so it's
yeah.
state level.
Now keep in mind, before we came on, we had heard that resolutions were a thing that was unheard of. That wasn't something that state central committee members did. We just showed up before this. I was told state central committee members just showed up, voted the way they were told, and that was it. That was their job. They showed up 3 times a year, voted the way they were told, and got out. And I said, we understood that's not the reason why the state central committee was formed. The state central committee was formed for the voters, to be the voice of the voters in their district, not to be controlled by the party bosses. So if you choose to vote for me in March, I'm going to continue to be the voice of the Republican voters in Senate District 5. This is a volunteer position. I'm not appointed by a statewide candidate. I don't get any kickbacks or favors. I don't have a personal or political career goal or agenda. I am truly there for the voters of Senate District 5. So my opponent, however, if she is elected, be sure that she will do the will of the party establishment. That is what she will be there to do, just as the lady that I beat out the first time was there to do. So we did pass a resolution opposing President Biden's detrimental changes to Title IX, the gender identity policies. We attempted to pass a resolution ensuring that the ORP became a pro-life party, and we were opposed by other pro-lifers on the committee. So again, when you do all this stuff, you expose. And that's part of the reason why we got elected, to do the hard work, the dirty work of exposing, okay? We needed to find out who was truly what they said they were and who was just playing the part and going along. Well, we helped to uncover who was truly pro-life in the party and who was just going along because it was politically expedient to do so. We co-sponsored the resolution to censure the Blue 22. For those who aren't familiar with the Blue 22, these were 22 Republicans of the House who decided they were going to go back on their word when they agreed to vote for a very conservative House Speaker with a very conservative policy agenda, and they decided to go and side with the Democrats instead and vote their very moderate guy in, so that it would make it very difficult for us to get any kind of conservative policies passed in the future.
Traitors.
Derek would have been great.
And yeah, a lot of the blame, I'm not going to say all of it, but a lot of the blame can be placed on that House Speaker and those 22 with what happened with issue 1 and with issue 2.
Yeah.
And so anyway, we did pass a resolution to support the passage of legislation to require 60% to amend the Ohio Constitution. We passed a resolution ensuring fairness and transparency in committee resources access. This had to do with something I brought because I found out that there were state central committee members who had access to their voters' information within their Senate district and were able to download it and contact those voters, and others of us had no access. I had no access, if you're wondering.
Wow.
So I made a big stink about it, brought it to the committee. Now I do have access after fighting for that, but I can't download anything. So
Oh
it's
my goodness.
so I can't. It's not user friendly. I see it, can't download it. But you know, we're getting closer, right? So we also passed a resolution to support partisan school board races because we are tired of seeing at our local level what happens, and I'm going to use Tip City here as a great example. We had 2 great conservative Republican candidates. We had 2 Democrat candidates, and we had a couple of unaffiliated candidates. So I had people from Tip City who were very upset, Republican voters sending me texts of other well-known Republicans who were posing with the Democrat candidates and supporting them. They were actually on their committees to get reelected. And so I'm like, what is going on? So we had well-known Republicans in Tip City supporting Democrats. So unfortunately, by the time I was made aware of what was going on and tried to get support for these candidates, as I tried to do in Tip City, Troy, and Bethel, tried to get party resources and that was a big uphill battle, but we did get some support for those candidates. However, for Tip City candidates, we got into the game late. And so it turned out that the 2 Democrats got elected and 1 unaffiliated from California who had just moved here.
Wow.
So
Our ground
I'm like,
sucks.
we've got to, this can't happen again. I mean, this, in a conservative Republican area, we got 2 Democrats elected and an unaffiliated with the help of local well-known Republican leaders. So I am going to be writing about this. I'm a lot of it behind on my writing. So be patient with me if you get my newsletter. I've got a lot I'm writing about, but little time to fit it all in. So that is where that resolution was born out of, because I'm arguing that we've got to have R's and D's behind those names because there were so many people that had no idea that the people they were voting for were Democrats, because there was these Republican leaders that were saying, hey, you need to vote for this person. Now again, you need to do your due diligence and do your homework, but most people don't.
But had there
And-
been R's and D's by the names on the ballot, then they could have easily selected,
Yeah.
oh, I'm going with the R's.
Yeah, and I do understand there is an argument against that because of the Hatch Act, and it would keep some individuals that work for the federal government from being able to run for the school board. So that is an issue. And we did submit a letter to Governor DeWine and the Ohio Senate urging to pass and sign into law the SAFE Act and the Parents' Right to Know Act. Those recently passed the House and Senate. Our governor vetoed it. It was overridden in both the House and the Senate, so that's a good thing. But that came from us speaking to our legislators and saying, hey, this is what we expect from you.
Yeah.
You're there to serve the people of your district. Don't forget about it. Don't go giving in to special interests and doing what, veering off. We're going to hold you accountable, and this is what we expect from you. So, yes, I do think we played a part by putting pressure as the governing board of directors of the Republican Party. But see, we have a lot of opposition because we have people, the majority on the committee, who want it to go back to the way it's always been, controlled by the party bosses, the narrative, everything controlled by the party bosses. So how do they do that? How do they take the power away from the people and put it back into the hands of the few? So we can keep recycling candidates like DeWine, like Husted, the same old.
LaRose.
From controlling the state central committee is how they do it.
They're the kingmakers.
Yes. Yeah. So they will be pouring a lot of money into these races in March to make sure that people like me, people like my conservative counterparts that are running again, and unfortunately, several of my conservative counterparts after 2 years decided this wasn't worth it. And I can't blame them. You're facing opposition. It's an uphill battle. You're getting constantly attacked from the other side. You've got thousands of dollars being poured into your opponent's campaign. I found out that my party chairman, Alex Trantafilu, had donated his campaign staff to statewide candidates like DeWine and Husted and LaRose. And so he donated campaign staff to them. They're using those staffers to make phone calls on behalf of our opponents.
Oh my.
That is against our bylaws. You can't use a committee funds to get out the currently seated members. So in the executive session this past Saturday, I asked about this during our budget discussion, about monies being used against me and against my conservative colleagues to make sure that we didn't have a chance and monies and staffers being used to make calls. And I got completely ignored.
I watched it.
Yeah, well, that was an executive session, so I
Okay.
didn't, yeah, but, so that was not, videoed, but, so he acknowledged it, he was like, okay, Jeff, basically I heard you, and then tried to move right on, and I said, hey, that was a question, I need reassurance this isn't happening, is this happening? Totally ignored. So we had a couple other conservatives try to, because this is a Zoom meeting, jump on this chat box and say, hey, we want to know if this is happening. Completely ignored, quickly shut down the meeting. So the fact that it wasn't addressed is an omission to me, that this is absolutely going on. And yeah, I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to talk about, and I'm going to continue to talk about these shenanigans that are going on. Because this is why people don't trust the Ohio Republican Party. This is why you've got conservatives that are on the fence going, you know what, I'm ready to be independent. I'm so sick of this. I can't identify with the Democrats, and I can't even identify with the Republicans now, because they don't want to have a platform, they don't want to state what they believe in, they want to play the game, they want to be pastel purple, they don't want to be bold red conservative, and so they're like, you know what, I'm out. So that's what I deal with a lot in the voters in my district. We have a lot of unaffiliated voters, and
we saw that the turnout in 2022,
Yeah.
we had a low turnout, didn't we?
Oh, yeah.
People are getting very
people
discouraged.
are sick of it. And so we didn't, again, going back to the fact that we didn't have a lot of conservatives that wanted to run again, and then we did have some that did and decided to withdraw because they found out that they had hand-picked challengers that were well-moneyed, and they were like, you know, I can't compete with that. So, and it takes a lot of toll on state central committee members. Again, we're not getting paid for this. We're not representatives or senators that get a paycheck for this. So this is us doing this because we want to serve locally, we want to serve at the state level, we want to be a voice for the people. So going back to the other, we passed a resolution urging a no vote on the Ohio Right to Reproductive Freedom Act. That was issue 1. Resolution protecting the sanctity of life for the preborn in Ohio. I wrote that one, and that did get passed. Supported resolution condemning Hamas and the global rise of anti-Semitism. I co-sponsored that. Supported endorsement opposing issue 2, recreational marijuana legalization, and supported resolution in support of legislation to prohibit mask mandates. I have always stood for the principles and values of the Republican Party as they are defined in our platform at the national level. The RNC has a platform. They talk about traditional family values. They talk about one man and one woman in marriage, and that being God's sanction, that, you know, that is the way to go, the only way to go. They talk about the sanctity of life and protecting the unborn. They talk about these things. Take a look at our national platform, because I use that as an example of, guys, we should at least be at the point where we can say the same thing as what our national platform says. But no, what did we get? 2 meetings ago, we had a platform committee that met. They decided to make it so vanilla as to be tasteless. It wasn't even something I could call a platform. I don't know what it was. It wasn't a platform. It was 2 pages of something that I think most Democrats could probably agree with. They had taken out unborn. They had taken out traditional family, the references. And so at the meeting, I get to stand up and fight my own party on what's going on. And so we did get the unborn put back in. We were limited to 2 amendments, even though per Robert's rules, that shouldn't have been the way that was done. We shouldn't have been limited, but we were. So we were able to get the unborn back in there. And we had one guy in the back yell no during the vote. That was Dave Johnson, by the way. I'll give him all the credit for that. So no to supporting putting the unborn back in. So this is kind of just to give you a picture of what we're fighting at the state party level, and it's an important fight. It's a calling, frankly, for me. I'm going to speak for myself. I'm not going to speak for others who are running. For me, this is a calling because it's not really something that I want to do again, to be honest. But I feel like God has put me here. So I'm in the fight. As long as He wants me to continue to serve, I will. And I will continue, if I am reelected, to pledge my loyalty to my Republican voters, not the establishment. I will continue to bring accountability and speak loudly about things that are going on in the party that are corrupt. I'll bring accountability to Republican candidates and elected officials. I will continue to oppose party endorsements in the primary, and I will always protect the unborn with life beginning at conception. I make no apologies for that. So hopefully that tells you a little bit about my journey over the last 2 years, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those now.
I'll go first.
Okay.
Anything we can do to help you, whether it's pamphlets, literature, yard signs, knocking on doors, I'm in it.
Balance here, but I did get the Give, Send, Go up. Scott had suggested that I do that. I think that was a great idea, because on the state central committee, we don't have to file any reports about the contributions we receive, which I frankly think should change. I think that we should be having to file reports about our contributions, but Give, Send, Go is a way where people can see, the money that you are bringing in. So I probably raised at this point just under 1,000. I am projected to needing, based on what I know my opponent is probably going to be bringing out here, I'll probably need at least 5,000 to have a shot. Yeah, and I will spend my own money as well too, because I believe in this.